Hello everyone, and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. We join you today from Lahoma for the annual North Central Oklahoma Research Station Field Tour. The event features 13 different educational presentations from some of Oklahoma State University's top experts in plant and soil sciences and agricultural economics. Over the next few weeks, we will bring much of that information to you. But first, the Lahoma Field Day began with Congressman Frank Lucas, chairman of the House Ag Committee, talking about the Farm Bill process.
From my perspective, it would be nice to know what the policies are going to be before we put the wheat in the ground in September. That rarely happens, and it may not happen this time, but at least I'd like to think we'll be far enough along. I can explain to the folks back home what that conference report says even before it's signed by the president, so they can make reasonable decisions about their future.
Congressman Lucas says part of the challenge in getting to that point is education.
We've had a huge turnover in membership. The last Farm Bill was passed in 2008. Over half the membership has changed out since 2008. They weren't there for the debates last time, or the discussion. We're voting on the amendments, we're voting on the bill. They're a blank sheet. So we've got to educate those folks.
If you would like to hear more of Congressman Lucas's comments, go to our website, sunup.okstate.edu. Now, for perspective on the existing Farm Bill and what producers can expect in the next few weeks, we turn to OSU ag economist Rodney Jones.
We're currently in the middle of sign up for the 2013 farm program, which again is an extension of the older Farm Bill, but people need to make a decision as to whether they want to participate in what's called the acre program, the average crop revenue election program, or the direct counter-cyclical program. We made that decision 4 years ago for the 2008 Farm Bill for 2009 through 2012. But with this extension, farmers are being asked to make that decision again, and the decision may be different this time. In 2009, Oklahoma was the largest state participant in the acre program for good reason. We had a poor wheat crop that year, and the acre decision turned out to be the best economic decision for many of our producers. They don't want to necessarily make the mistake of just assuming that that is automatically going to be the best choice this time around. It does look like at the state level, acre may trigger for 2013, but we have a lot of especially wheat farms in the state of Oklahoma where the wheat looks a little better now. Some farms it looks bad, some farms it looks good. And so that farm trigger has to trip as well. In other words, they have to have a loss on their farm for acre to be the best decision in 2013. So my recommendation for producers is to look at their own crops on their own farm here before the June 3rd sign-up deadline. And if they have good-looking wheat, they're probably going to want to sign up for the direct counter-cyclical program. If they have poor-looking wheat on that particular FSA farm number, they're probably going to want to choose the acre program. They do give up a little bit of the direct payment to go into the acre program, but if they have poor-looking wheat, it's likely to pay off. If they have good-looking wheat, it's likely to not pay off this time around.
Okay, so almost decision time.
Almost decision time. The deadline for acre sign-up is June 3rd. If they're certain that they want to continue with the direct counter-cyclical program option, they have a little more time. I think it's until early August to go ahead and sign up for that program.
Okay, and then just wait and see in Washington, right?
Let's wait and see in Washington what comes after 2013. See what kind of a farm bill we have after this one expires.
Okay, Rodney Jones, great information. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Al Sutherland with your Mesonet weather report. Tuesday was not the kind of day farmers want or need. A map of maximum air temperatures for May 14th shows that the state was warm. Beaver was the hot spot with a high of 94 degrees. Temperatures were in the 90s in the west and southwest and upper 80s for most central and eastern Mesonet locations. The lowest temperature was 83 at Mount Herman in the far southeast. It was also windy. A map of maximum wind gusts for Tuesday shows that it was gusty across the state. Granfield had a peak wind gust of 43 miles per hour. West of I-35, the wind gusts peaked in the mid-30s, while east of I-35, they generally topped out in the mid-20s. Tuesday was a blustery day, generally from 8 in the morning to 8 in the evening, as we can see in a wind graph from Weatherford. This combination of warm air and strong winds stresses winter wheat and canola. It creates a higher demand for water than the plant can keep up with, and if this lasts too long, it hurts grain fill, reducing yield and quality. Hopefully we won't see too many days like Tuesday. Here's Gary with a moisture and drought update.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to SUNUP. Certainly hope you've had a great week. Let's start out with a look at the latest U.S. Drought Monitor map as we've assessed the data, giving us a little bit better picture of what's going on in Oklahoma. Well, as you can see, really the only big change we've had over the last week is a little bit of expansion of that D4 in southwestern Oklahoma. Now let me show you why. This is a rainfall map from the Oklahoma Mesonet for May 1st through May 15th. Now what you see here is extremely disappointing, unfortunately, for the month of May. Most of the state has seen less than an inch, and in many cases even less. Now the state-wide average for the first half of May was only about 0.9 inches, and that's more than 1.5 inches below normal. In most cases, this amounts to about 20 to 60% of normal for the first 15 days of the month of May. Now this is important because May is one of our most important months for rain. So as we go from May through mid-June, this is our primary rainy season. So we don't like to see deficits during this time period. And that's what we've seen over the last 2 years during this time period. So overall, this has been the 10th driest first half of May for the state since our records began in 1921. So certainly bad news in that area. Now let's take a little bit of a look into the future. We see the latest U.S. seasonal drought outlook. This goes from basically mid-May through the end of August. And what you can see is, unfortunately, the continued drought in the western half of the state, possibly some improvement in eastern Oklahoma. But again, this is not the type of map that we want to see as we look forward, as we start to approach the summer months. All right, now we're back into the thick of it in spring with rainfall deficits building, so we need that rainfall to continue, and we definitely need it to shift to the west. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
One of the big highlights of the tour here at Lahoma is talk about the new varieties, and here to talk about those, Jeff Edwards. Jeff, what's new and exciting this year?
Well, we've got several new varieties to choose from. It used to be in the Great Plains, we would hang on to a variety forever, Jagger being an example. It's getting to where the average life of our varieties is much shorter. We have a lot of new varieties to choose from, and that's a good thing for our producers. Two that I really like, we released in 2011, Ruby Lee being the first one. This is one of my favorite wheat varieties. It has very good top-end yield potential. It is what I call an intensive management type wheat. Now, it doesn't have good disease resistance. It's not tolerant of acid soil conditions. Why do I like it so much? It's one that if you put a lot of inputs into it and treat it with a fungicide, it will reward you. I really like the variety for its top-end yield potential. It's also one that'll fool you a little bit. It reminds me of a variety we used to grow called Overly, where it has a small head size, but it has large kernels that fill up that head. The other one we released in 2011 is Garrison. It's a late maturing variety. Garrison, when we released it, we were looking for something to be an endurance upgrade. Okay. Endurance was the #1 variety in the state for a while. It's still #2. With Garrison, we have acid soil tolerance. We improved on the test weight of endurance, which was its weakness. 2012, we had a shift in the stripe rust races we were dealing with, and Garrison fell prey to that shift in stripe rust races. So it is one that if you're going to grow Garrison, just like Ruby Lee, I would be prepared to spray a foliar fungicide on it. If you're willing to do that, I do consider it to be an endurance upgrade. Better yield potential, better test weight. So it's one, if you're growing in endurance, it's one to take a look at to replace some of those acres.
What part of the state is this most popular in?
Both of these would be adapted to all parts of Oklahoma.
Okay, so anywhere in the state they'll do well.
They're widely adaptable. Ruby Lee, again, those restrictions on not being tolerant to low soil pH kind of holds it back a little bit in some pockets within the state. But as long as your pH is in good shape, it'll have a fit.
All right, let's move down and take a look at a few more varieties.
Let's do it. Our next two varieties that we'll talk about are Gallagher and Iba. They were released in 2012, and both of these are what I call the sons of Duster. They both have Duster as a parent. They differ, though, in how they behave. We've got a little bit of sibling rivalry here.
Okay.
Gallagher is an early maturing variety. Like Duster, it is tolerant of acid soil conditions. It is Hessian fly resistant. It's a good grazer. It even outproduces Duster in terms of forage production. The only thing that I have that I would put it a notch below Duster is that it is early maturing and early to first hollow stem, so you can't graze it quite as long as you can
off a little
Duster.
quicker there. Okay.
Right, but disease resistance on it's better than Duster. Great disease resistance so far, and about a 10 to 15% increase in kernel size over Duster.
Okay.
So if you're growing Duster, this is the first variety we've had at OSU that I would really call a Duster replacement.
Okay.
Iba has its own list of attributes. It is late maturing. It is not tolerant of acid soils, is not Hessian fly resistant, but it has a really good disease package, probably a little bit better than Gallagher. Iba also has an increase in seed size, and out of the three of them, has a little bit better test weight than Duster or Gallagher. Not that the other two are bad, but this one is really strong in terms of test weight. And Iba would have the widest area of adaptation.
Okay.
Gallagher is an Oklahoma wheat. We're talking in the center of Oklahoma,
right.
Central Oklahoma. Iba will extend on into Texas,
okay,
into Kansas.
So it's got a good wide, we can get this out of the state a bit.
Absolutely. It'll go into Kansas all the way up to I-70 into the Texas Panhandle. Very wide area of adaptation.
Very good. Okay, I think we have time for one more variety. So tell us about Billings.
Billings is what I call the George Harrison of wheat varieties. It is an outstanding wheat variety, but I always tend to forget about it whenever I'm talking about wheat varieties. I focus on Gallagher and Iba and some of the newer ones. Billings has been out for a while. It still has a rock-solid disease resistance package, excellent milling and baking characteristics, great test weight, great top-end yield potential. As the name implies, it's primarily a north-central Oklahoma wheat.
Okay.
The thing that holds it back from being more broadly adaptable is drought tolerance. It's not that drought tolerant. It can do well outside of north-central Oklahoma, but if you move it into southwest Oklahoma, into the Panhandle, in those areas, it's probably going to need to be under irrigation. But if you have ground that's not prone to drought, or you have irrigation, something you really want to push the yield potential on, Billings is a great variety.
Great variety. Now, we've talked about just a few of the OSU varieties here today, but you've got, is this every variety around the state?
Well, this is every variety we're testing. We have around 43 varieties here at Lahoma this year. Previously, we would test 20 to 25 varieties at this site. This year, we have varieties from Lima Grain Cereal Seed, Syngenta, Agseco, Westbred, and we have some of their new varieties. They're varieties that are approaching release. So we're going to get a chance to take a look at those, and we'll harvest them and have the data available within a day or two of harvest in most cases.
Now, for folks who aren't here today, though, these trials, if they don't have an easy time getting to Lahoma, they're out in different places around the state, right?
They are, and we leave the signs up on all of our trials right up until harvest. We have very large trials just like this one here at Lahoma, Chickasha, Altus, and at Goodwell, and then at an additional 20 sites around the state on farmer fields. We have replicated trials where we test 20 to 25 varieties at those sites. So we have an extensive testing system. You can find a location near you.
All right, good information as always. Jeff Edwards, our small grain specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
We're catching up with Kim Anderson, our grain marketing specialist, this week at Grain Grading School, and everybody, of course, gearing up for harvest.
And what we're doing is we're training elevator grain handlers how to grade grain, because the only way to buy and sell grain is to grade it accurately. If it's not graded accurately, then you're either going to pay too much are not enough for the product. Also, to have an efficient market system, you got to know what product, what grades, what quality you have in the bin so that you can explain that to the buyer to get a fair price on the other end. So what we're doing is the grain grading schools to keep the market, the price fair and the market efficient.
Okay, and speaking of markets, let's kind of cover what the latest market news is this week.
Well, wheat prices, they were down 15 cents on Thursday, down at the end of the week. I think that's because of the moisture and the rain going through in the hard red winter wheat area. I think the market believes that our yields have improved, that at least we're getting what USDA predicted, and as yields go up, as expected production goes up, our price goes down, and I think that's what's going on right now in wheat.
Okay, and how is corn playing into prices, and what's the dynamic there?
Well, the market had been watching the corn planting. Of course, it was delayed. I think a good many acres got planted this last week. Some estimates have for Monday 60 million acres of corn out of the 97 million predicted. I don't think that had any impact on wheat prices, maybe a little bit with it getting in the ground. The nearby corn prices held relatively steady. Deferred corn prices were down a little bit.
Okay. With all that in mind, your advice for those wanting to market that 2013 crop?
Well, the forward contract price in Oklahoma for wheat's $7.20. If that's important to you, then I think you should, and you can't sleep at night, I think you should take some of that. But analysts say don't forward contract more than 20%. I personally believe that if prices go down, that means my production's going to be higher and that's going to offset it. But if prices go up, that means my production is probably lower, and I'm going to wish I hadn't a forward contract. So price and production is going to offset themselves to a certain degree, and so I probably wouldn't price any, but if I couldn't sleep at night, I'd get me some forward contracts.
Okay, Kim Anderson, thanks a lot. Good catching up with you here in Garfield County.
The spring calving season is pretty well all wrapped up. The cows have been put out into the summer pastures with the bulls for the breeding season for next year's calf crop. I think this is an ideal time to look back at the calving season that we've just been through and see where any problems might have occurred, see if there's any patterns in those problems where we can start to make some improvements now in order to alleviate those problems next year. For example, did we have to pull more calves than we really would like to out of our first calf heifers this year? If that's the case, it's a pretty good tip that we probably need to look at our bull selection in future years more carefully to make sure that they have low birth weight EPDs before we put them with the replacement heifers. Also, I think that would mean that we'd want to really examine our heifer growing program to make sure that those heifers are at a body condition score of about a 6 at calving time so that they have optimum growth and are good and strong when they have that first calf. Did we have more calf sickness, especially more calf diarrhea this year than in previous years? I think that's a particular problem that we want to examine very, very closely. If we've had a real problem with that in the past, first of all, let's visit with our local veterinarian and examine if there's some management procedures we need to change in order to help prevent that. Such things as changing where our calving pens or our calving traps will be. We might want to move to a different area so we can break the cycle of the pathogens that are causing those particular problems. If we have a large ranch operation here in Oklahoma and of having some calf diarrhea, calf scour problems, we probably want to consider looking at what's called the sandhill calving system. And that's a particular system that's been developed in Nebraska where they segregate groups of calves as they're born and make sure that the older calves aren't exposed to newborns and therefore reducing that particular pattern of taking pathogens from one group of calves to the next and exposing them to the calf scours. You can Google Sandhill's calving system and learn a lot more about that particular system. Also, you may want to visit with your local veterinarian about giving cows a pre-calving scours vaccine. And what that does is just help bolster the colostrum so that the cows that are giving the first milk to those baby calves are giving a little more antibody protection via that vaccine. visit your veterinarian about that. I hope that as you look back on this year's calving season, you can identify those problems, help correct them before next year, and we'll have a higher percentage of calf crop that goes to the sale barn the following fall. Hey, we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
And continuing with wheat, we have a pretty exciting announcement here at Oklahoma State University, and we have Dr. Brett Carver to talk to us about it. What is this new variety?
Oh, we're very excited to announce the official release by the Oklahoma Agriculture Experiment Station of a Clearfield variety called Doublestop CL+.
Okay, what does that mean for Oklahoma ag producers?
What it means for ag producers is an option to control very difficult weeds. And that's what the Clearfield system is designed to do. It combines a very unique trait and genetic origin of that trait with a certain chemical that can be applied to wheat with that genetic trait so that the wheat is tolerant to the herbicide, but the weeds are not.
Ah, okay. And let's talk about the actual wheat variety here, more about it.
Yeah, so Doublestop CL Plus came from an experimental line, or the experimental designation was OK09915C, and that's what the producers are going to see probably in the variety trials at this point. But from this point forward, we will use the variety name. And OK09915C was produced from a very complex cross, and the experimental lines, I could tell what the lines were, and then you could say, well, those are the parents, but they wouldn't really mean very much.
Right.
But I can tell you what the grandparents are, which would be more familiar to our producers. So first and foremost, TAM 110 was used as the original donor of the first gene for herbicide, imazamox tolerance. Okay, so TAM 110 figures very prominently in the pedigree. Another variety delivered the second gene. There are 3 genomes in wheat, so out of the 3 genomes, we had now 2 genes in 2 of the genomes that confer this herbicide tolerance. That came from a variety called Mason, or a very close relative of Mason. And Mason is a soft red winter wheat. Very thankful for that donation. Again, this was provided by the donor of the trait, that being BASF.
Right.
So you have TAM 110, Mason. Then we add in our own few ingredients, such as 2174, barred one from Kansas State University called Jagger, and then another variety from Oklahoma State University called Entrada. You put all that together and you have a very complex cross producing this variety.
How long did it take you to put this variety together?
Normally it would take about 12 years. We talk about going through the different grades of school for a variety. Well, this one skipped a couple of grades actually. We wanted to accelerate the development of this variety. So we skipped the middle grades, 2 of them, and it only took about 9 to 10 years to come out with, to go from the cross until the time we actually released it this spring. We don't normally do it that way. We skipped a couple of stages where we might apply some different selection points. Didn't need to in this particular variety. We still have the traits that we're looking for. Yield and quality, disease resistance, on top of course, herbicide tolerance.
Right, and it came down to these 2 varieties right here, right?
That's correct. We had 2 choices, and not that we only have 2 choices.
Right.
When we came to the senior class, there were 2 seniors that stood out. And the 915C that I've already mentioned, but also behind me is OK09935C.
Right.
They're not necessarily SIBs, but they're very closely related lines from a very similar set of crosses. The one difference that might be obvious, hopefully through the camera, is their maturity.
Right.
Now this one was a later maturing variety. The 935C was much earlier, and 935C you would think would be more suited for years like last year, years like this year. Maybe not though with the freeze damage that we've had. But contrary to expectation, it was the Doublestop that actually yielded better than the early maturing variety last year in 2012 that really got our attention. But even more so, what drew our attention to Doublestop was its disease resistance. We think this variety is probably going to go in, it can go across the state of Oklahoma, but it will probably go in areas where weed problems are greatest, particularly feral rye. And that rye situation is a little bit more prominent in northern Oklahoma. And in northern Oklahoma, we have a disease called wheat soil-borne mosaic, one that is a very routine target in our breeding program to breed resistance to. This variety has very good resistance to wheat soil-borne mosaic. This one did not. And that's what really made the difference.
That's amazing. And one of the cool things about it, the release is a little bit different than other varieties.
Right, we have to now get approval from, of course, our home institution.
Right.
And of course, approval from growers when they see the results in the variety trials. Well, of course, we always rely on that. But the Oklahoma Agriculture Experiment Station has to pass their approval, but also BASF has to give their approval. And to BASF, they want to see a certain level of herbicide tolerance. It has to tolerate a commercial rate of the chemical. We have been through many years of testing in that regard, and there is no doubt about it. We have a very good level of tolerance to imazamox. In fact, better than average in what I have seen in other breeding materials.
Really?
That's very encouraging.
Okay.
Yeah, so that allows us to use the chemical at a level that's recommended for controlling weeds like feral rye, but also the application of a crop seed oil, methylated seed oil, that I think heats up that chemical and makes it more effective against those more difficult weeds.
So
this one can tolerate that very well.
This is a great addition to the wheat varieties across Oklahoma.
No doubt about it, and we will continue this this part of the program. And it's not a very large part of our breeding program, but I would say it occupies 5 to 10% of the breeding materials that come through each and every year, those being the Clearfield type lines.
Excellent. Well, we're looking forward to seeing more of it across Oklahoma. Thank you very much, Dr. Brett Carver with Oklahoma State University.
That does it for us this time. We'll have much more from here at Lahoma next week. Remember, you can find our stories anytime on our website, sunup.okstate.edu. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. I'm Lyndall Stout, and we'll see you next time at SUNUP.